This is SciFiLysis, the place where we take our favourite stories, bathe them in digestive juices, and see what organelles of truth we can extract for our own evil schemes. Published in 1898, this science fiction feels remarkably fresh. I read this story when I was a kid. I think it was the first science fiction book I actually read cover to cover. And for my reread, I tried to skim, but I constantly found myself drawn in to the delightful prose. Plot summary. Spoilers ahead. Earthbound telescopes observe potential volcanoes on Mars, and later some mysterious objects fall to Earth just outside of London. They're discovered to be metallic cylinders, which open to reveal octopus-like creatures inside that are struggling to move. The crowd is incinerated by a heat ray, and our main character has their first miraculous escape. Going home, they reassure themselves that the strong Earth gravity will trap the creatures in the hole, and a second cylinder falls during the night. The next day, the military has surrounded the crater, and the heat ray hits the top of the main character's house. This causes him to decide to flee and take his wife to safety at the cousin's house, the next town over. For some reason, he decides to leave his wife behind and return the horse cart that he borrowed for the journey. Seeing horse travel next to all of these high-tech science concepts was really fun. During the journey, the third cylinder falls, blocking his return to his wife. And the main character glimpses the tripods for the first time against a creepy storm. They flee back to their home, where they're trapped, and the army tries to evacuate people. The main character witnesses 4 tripods battling the artillery. One of the tripods is destroyed, but the Martians fight back and cook people sheltering in a river to avoid the heat rays. Once again, the point of view character mysteriously escapes and paddles downstream to London. Shortly after, London is blanketed in a poison smog that the Martians are releasing, and the point of view character escapes yet again and gets swept up in the mass evacuation panic of London. During their wandering, the main character meets a priest, and they end up trapped in a house together when another cylinder lands beside it. And that's very convenient because it gives them an opportunity to spy on the Martians building and feeding on humans that they've caught. At this point, the story stops to give a brief aside where it details the anatomy and physiology of the creatures that was learned later on. And the red weed from Mars is spreading far and wide. Because they're starving, the priest starts to go mad, and the main character is forced to kill him to stop the Martians from hearing them. Eventually, in desperation, he crawls outside and sees a dead Martian in the pit. While he's scavenging for food in London, he discovers that there's a disease spreading among the red weeds, and there's multiple dead Martians being fed on by crows and dogs. It turns out that microbes infected the Martians and repelled the attack, doing what the humans couldn't do for themselves with all of their military might. The main character returns to their home and reunites with their loving wife. Science issues. In the story, Mars is described as having 1/3 of Earth's gravity, temperatures a bit colder than Earth, small oceans, and a thin argon-rich atmosphere, plus polar snowcaps. In reality, Mars has about 38% of Earth's gravity, much lower temperatures, the poles are actually solid carbon dioxide, and pretty much no atmosphere and no oceans. The story posits that Mars is older and cooled faster than Earth, so life was likely to be more advanced and eager to flee that dying planet. Altogether, this isn't a bad guess for a story that was written in 1890. I'll give H.G. Wells top marks on that aspect. The Martians are presented as being a giant head, mouth and lungs with no capacity for digestion or reproduction. They need to inject nutrient-rich blood directly into their veins, harvested originally from flimsy bipedal creatures that they carried on their ships, and later from humans. Given everything in the story, I think it's reasonable to infer that Earth and Mars life have a common origin and therefore have compatible biochemistry. The main issue I see with this bit of world building is the rate of nutrient flow. Humans only carry a small percentage of their daily nutrients in their blood at any moment, so even draining all of the blood from one human being wouldn't actually supply all that much nutrition to a Martian. The Martians struggle to deal with the higher gravity until the machines are built to assist their movement. To give you a comparison, the scaled equivalent for humans would be trying to work under 2.6 times Earth gravity if you just do it proportionally. Humans have been predicted to be capable of surviving up to 3 times Earth gravity full time. And out of interest, 70% of Earth-like planets have gravity below 3.5 times Earth scale. So there's a lot of potential exoplanets out there for us, at least by that criteria. Earth has a much higher oxygen level, even than that vaguely hypothesized in the story. We know that humans breathing over 30% oxygen experience a range of damaging effects, mostly caused by free radical formation. Martians are likely to also suffer oxygen poisoning on Earth, so not ideal bit of world building there. We need to find a way around that. In the story, the Martians can vocalize and have a single ear on the back of their head, but they don't seem to use it for complex communication. They are observed working in close coordination, and the point of view character hypothesizes they may have some form of telepathy. The Martians also have large eyes, but cannot see blue or purple wavelengths. It's very common for different species of animals on Earth to vary in their sensitivity to different wavelengths, and blue light is filtered out of seawater, but it should be present on the surface of Mars. So perhaps the Martians were originally an aquatic species from deeper water, and the evaporation of their oceans has forced them to adapt to the surface. The Martians are observed to never sleep and not fatigue, and this is a bit weird because all Earth animals seem to need sleep for survival, even though we don't know exactly what the purpose of it is, which is a great mystery left unsolved. The Martians have no form of sex, instead they bud off young individuals. So real organisms are driven to rely on sexual reproduction to keep their immune systems ahead of microbial pressure, because microbes evolve much more rapidly than vertebrates, for example. So I give top marks for this part of the story, because that all integrates really nicely with later bits of world building. In the story, there are no microbes on Mars. Either they never evolved or were deliberately wiped out by the Martians. This feels like a bit of a fundamental misunderstanding of ecology. Nutrient cycle and evolution, both very difficult to imagine without microbes. Maybe Martian life evolved elsewhere and only multicellular forms found their way to Mars. But we do know that microbes seem to be essential for animal functions. Mice can be raised with zero skin or gut bacteria in something called axenic culture, but they are observed to have major defects in their immune and digestive systems as a result. For a bit of context, the first systemic searches for bacteria that cause disease took place in the late 1800s, around the time this book was written. This was the period when the germ theory of disease won out over alternative explanations. The Martians were also noted as having no clothing and being insensitive to temperatures. Real-life Mars varies from negative 80 degrees Celsius to positive 20 at the equator at noon, so it's plausible that they could handle London summer temperatures, which are only a little bit warmer than that. The bacteria that colonized the Martians were found to be common Earth species, which is consistent with the whole story unfolding over 10 days. Those microbes could have come from the blood injected into the Martians from human beings, because we now know that around 60% of people that are otherwise healthy have bacteria circulating in their blood system. The poison smog in the story was analysed and found to contain an unknown element with blue or green spectral lines. It's mentioned differently in different parts of the story, which forms a compound of argon. So normally that's an unreactive element, but argon can form a few compounds at very low temperatures or very high pressures, such as argon fluorohydride. In 1989, the periodic table wasn't completely filled out yet, so this is perfectly understandable explanation for a story of this period. Overall, I think the story gets top marks for its scientific foundations, doubly so given it's over a century old. It got way more right than wrong, and the wrong guesses it made were in context of the limited science at the time. By comparison, how silly will sci-fi from today seem if it turns out that faster than light travel, human-level AI and pointy-eared aliens end up not being real? The do-over. So this time I'm not going to pick at the minor scientific issues in the original story. Instead, I'm more focused on making the story more fun. So the original was understandably very Eurocentric, that the Martians conveniently landed right outside London at a time when they were right at their cultural peak. So I'm going to swap one historical coincidence for another. The story is now set in Cuba among the Taino people in 1514 as Columbus is establishing the first Spanish colony. He's enslaved the local indigenous people, forcing them to farm and gather gold from the hillsides. And for fun, let's make the Taino speak like 18th century British upper-class people. You know, write what you know. So, our main character is a Taino boy who sneaks out from the slave compound to hunt for octopi on the reef flats at night to help feed his ailing grandfather. One night, a small metal cylinder falls from the sky into the coral reef, hissing with steam as it cools. When the boy sees the cap rotating, but then stop, and a desperate banging inside, he can't stop himself from helping whatever creature is trapped inside. He releases the octopus-like creature, and is about to kill it when the creature sings to him like his recently deceased grandmother, so he nurses it back to health with coconut juice, hiding it from the Spanish. The creature is, for some reason, unable to swim, but it desperately patrols the beach near where the cylinder sank, carrying a small silver ingot that it clung to as it was torn from the ocean. The boy understands and swims down to the cylinder, bringing back pieces of metal for the creature. During the night, it combines these ingots with gold diverted from the Spanish to build a tripod that ends up needing 2 pilots. The unlikely pair use the space-age weapon to destroy the Spanish colony, but one ship escapes. A flotilla of galleons return, bristling with cannons, and put the pair through a much more dangerous fight. After their narrow victory, they realize that the Spanish will keep sending ships until they are overwhelmed. Instead, the Taino send the young boy and his Martian friend to beg the Inca for assistance, who provide them with a ton of gold necessary for the Martian to create its final masterpiece. The creature builds a flying form of the weapon, and they sail across the Atlantic Ocean to burn Europe to the ground. So what do you think? Could you do a better job rewriting from the premise of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, one that didn't need an off-screen genocide as a feel-good ending? Let me know in your comments below. Fans of biology-focused hard science fiction should check out Our Vitreous Womb, my own series of novellas that explore a distant future for humanity built on pure biotechnology. Ebooks out on Amazon starting April 1st.